started to open up to them just a little bit, still not using the word atheist. And then September 11th happened. September 11th happened. September 12th. I'm an atheist. Don't call me anything else. I'm an atheist.
Welcome to Voices of Deconversion. We share the inspirational stories of deconversion told by former Christians who are now atheist or agnostic. Our stories remind us we're in it together. They give us hope to find our voice. They encourage us as we discover who we are and help us to embrace who we become. Now here's Steve with today's guest.
Okay, my guest today is a writer, activist, social critic, and commentator based in Dallas, Texas. His activism has garnered national attention on matters of race, religion, and politics. He's been featured in various national secular campaigns and was the first atheist featured in Ebony magazine. He is a founding member of the largest freethought organization in North Texas, advises for the Center for Inquiry and the American Humanist Association, and is an organizer for Black Nonbelievers of Dallas. His writing can be found on various venues including Secular Nation, Free Inquiry, American Atheist Magazine, and Time Magazine. You can also find him on the Graffiti Wall on Patheos, his self-titled blog on The Orbit, and as a regular on-air personality on Dogma Debate. It's my pleasure to welcome Alix Jules to the podcast today. Alix, thanks for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Tell me a little bit about what you're working on.
Yeah, right now I've got a couple of things in the fire. The first one is the American Humanist Association has a very interesting initiative. They actually have varying alliances that are set up based on interest and minority groups. And I think it was about a year and a half ago, they launched the Black Humanist Association, which is a really interesting concept where it begins to target or talk about some of the focus issues in that particular minority group, which is something that many Black atheists tend to gravitate to anyway, and it's something that is a constant discussion point in just American culture and society. So that's been a very interesting initiative to actually see and help grow. I actually am very excited about some of the upcoming announcements we've got. We've got a recent association with Surge and a couple of racial justice organizations that are also allies there, which is also great. And of course, the Center for Inquiry has the African American for Humanism Association, which is also always getting its hands wet in all kinds of things around the nation. Of course, because it's CFI, it tends to focus a lot more on skepticism and bringing the idea of skepticism into the African American community. And then, of course, Black Nonbelievers itself, which has a very specific mission, which is to become extremely visible in the African American community, where skepticism, again, isn't always present and or visible, or the idea of cultural coherence to Christianity is tantamount to any kind of identity, right? Because you can't be Black and not be a Christian. Well, Black Nonbelievers and many of the other organizations that have sprung from its existence is challenging that idea. So that, and again, I'm always writing something somewhere or talking to someone about something, but the Graffiti Wall is I think I'm working on a series right now that is working on a lot of the Black stories that just aren't being told right now. So I'm always busy.
So you said the Black was it Black Humanists? That organization started like a year and a half ago.
The Black Humanist Association, which is a different organization within the American Humanist Association, it's been about a year and a half old right now. We announced that it was almost a year ago.
Wow.
And that one, is much more activism based rather than some of the other organizations that come from traditional free thought organizations, which almost had the sole purpose of talking about religion and the separation of church and state, and pretty much just that. Well, the Black Humanist Association talks about racial identity, racial justice, human rights, etc. So they're much more hands-on, much more focused on making a real impact and change on the ground, almost at the grassroots level, versus everyone else who tends to focus on ideology and really big picture ideas, like I said, that you would see in traditional types of free thinker organization.
Yeah. And I was going to ask, so this applies to that organization, but others too, but was it hard to find other, and we may get into this later, but was it hard to find other Black non-believers when you first deconverted?
Yeah, I didn't think they existed, honestly. That was one of the big issues. And when I deconverted, there wasn't much of a support group out there at all for Black atheists. And if you look at the numbers, the Eris numbers, the Eris poll numbers, even the Pew numbers, African Americans in general are highly religious. And we're talking about the 95+% type of religious, where you see the general population is closer to the 69% that say that they're religious. We're talking about 95% of the African American that says that they're highly religious, not just religious, highly religious. And when you look at, again, the general population, if you accept the Pew survey, at 33%, 30%, people that are non-secular, that has no real bearing on the African American numbers, where again we're talking about anywhere between 1% and 3% that are non-secular, and of that maybe 0.5% to 1% that will actually call themselves atheists. So those are really big differences in those numbers. It's a massive chasm.
So what term do you prefer to use when you describe your religious beliefs?
It kind of depends on the audience, but I still use the term atheist, just out there, especially with just African Americans. And it's because it is the most identifiable. It's also one that I think has so much stigma that I try and normalize it as much as possible. People see me out there, they hear me, some of them are used to who I am, what I am, etc. But I'll be in the community and interacting with people, and some of them are still surprised when they find out, oh my God, you're an atheist. But you're such a nice person.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I did a campaign a couple of years ago, and it was actually a really big campaign. And I live next to a Fox Christian, not just a Christian, but a Fox News Christian. Yeah, that's a special kind of Christian.
That is a special kind of Christian.
And we were friends for years, and I wasn't very public about my atheism. Well, when you're on a national campaign and news vans are literally at your doorstep at that point, whoa, you kind of have to have these conversations. And she came over, and we started having these. She came over and she wanted to find out what was going on, and my wife was a little coy about it. And then later on that evening, she sees me on the news, and she sees this interview, and then she comes back the next day. It's like, okay, hold on a second.
She's like, this changes everything.
It didn't. That's what I was really surprised about.
Wow.
And she was so nice. And she said, well, I mean, I've babysat her kids, and vice versa. My daughter used to babysit her kids as well.
So you guys were pretty close.
We were. And she said, I should have known something. You just knew too much about the Bible. Now that was really funny.
That is hilarious.
Really funny. That was really funny. And she said, I mean, you had You have Bibles. I said the Quran should have told me something. I was like, maybe that might have been a little bit of a giveaway.
Oh, she saw that you had a Quran.
She did. And my response years ago when she asked me about it was like, I've studied all religions. I just it's something that. And she says, you just knew too much about the Bible to be a Christian. And that was hilarious. But in that same conversation, she said, how can you be an atheist? You're so nice. That was the first real time I heard that. And she said, God, I mean, you're a wonderful person. You're still going to hell, but you're such a wonderful person. It was still there.
You're going to burn in hell for eternity, but you're so nice.
You're so nice. So yeah, that's why I use the term atheist. I like the term, humanist or secular humanist, because that tells people what I'm doing rather than what I believe. Because I think humanism is the act of implementing compassion, humanism without any kind of spiritual beliefs or strings attached to it. So atheist, yes, atheist, agnostic, they all kind of in some form apply to me, but yeah, atheist. In fact, when the Ebony magazine article, the title was I'm the big A, right? And in the African American community, that's just not accepted. Just
like
not.
Literally like the Scarlet Letter, the big A.
It was. It absolutely was. It absolutely was. And I got a lot of backlash originally from there. I got a lot. And the article, I think, was 2011, 2012, right around there. I think it was 2011. And I got all kinds of notes from around the U.S. I got, people on Facebook. Now, of course, Facebook has 80 plus million, people on there. But actually, I think it was much, much smaller back then. And she was, everyone's on Facebook now. Mm-hmm. She was a 54-year-old African-American woman. And she said, I read your article. My husband's the only African-American atheist I've ever met. I've never even heard of. In fact, she married her husband because he was a non-believer, and she couldn't find anyone else that was was either Christian or not either Christian or Muslim, and that was not something that she was.
She was black as well, right?
And she was black.
Yeah, so she was having a hard time finding non-religious people within the community for the reasons you cited.
Yeah, exactly. And then there was this one woman who said, in my 30-some-odd years, I've not found another atheist, a black atheist, and I always felt broken. And that's kind of why I decided that I was going to be as active and as visible as I wound up being, is because of stories like that. And I still get them, but stories like that have been a big motivator in my level of activism and visibility. When I have kids that are telling me that they deal with abuse at home, either psychological or physical abuse, because they're trying to beat the spirit into them because they don't believe, that gets me up in the morning. I don't feel like writing today. Well, guess what? I'm going to be writing today. Or I don't want to do that next interview. I'm going to be doing that next interview. So yeah, it is a problem in the African American community, in the black community. Pretty much the entire umbrella of what we identify as black, we have some level of issue with spiritual belief. You go out to Africa and you've got Christianity that is mixing with witchcraft, and it's building on top of each other. So now you have superstition, you have issues with witches being either being killed, slaughtered, or rounded up in places like Uganda and Nigeria. So it's something that we have been trying to address for years. It's going to be a really long time before we're actually able to get some of that under control, where those human rights violations are really being just trampled on. But like I said, it's something that I feel very passionate about.
Well, that's great, Alix. I think that's so cool that, when you start feeling like, oh God, I don't know if I can do this or whatever. Oh, I can't do this anymore or whatever. It's thinking about that kid who's in that difficult situation in that home or whatever that gets you out of bed. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and jump into your story a little bit. Can you just describe your religious environment, the religious environment of your childhood?
Oh yeah. I grew up, well, my mom was Catholic, and given that we're from the Caribbean, that's a little bit of a difference that we don't tend to see in America or in Black America. Most African Americans are either Methodist or Baptist or they're Protestant. So my experience in the church is a little bit different than many other Blacks that are out there. But I grew up in New York, and it wasn't too uncommon for that to be the case. But my mother didn't think that the Catholic Church was strict enough. They weren't rigorous enough, especially when it came to biblical teachings. So she decided that she was going to stick me in a Seventh-day Adventist school.
Oh, they're strict.
Yeah, and which caused major issues with me growing up, because if you understand SDA ideology, well, the Catholic Church is the whore of Babylon. It is literally the whore of Babylon. And so I am a Catholic child in the Seventh-day Adventist school for years upon years, and picked on, bullied, etc. I mean, it was just part of my everyday reality. I was dealing with either being tripped up at school, pushed downstairs, all kinds of ridiculousness with
That's crazy.
It was.
How old were you when this was going on? Like grade school, or?
This is grade school up until the fourth grade, right?
Wow.
I'm just dealing with that constantly. And eventually my mom, me coming home crying was still wasn't enough. It still wasn't enough. Years of that, as as a 5, 6, 7-year-old, that wasn't enough. And so eventually in about the fourth grade, I just said, I just can't do this anymore. And there were a couple of differences in the administration, and my mom was like, okay, let's find you a different school. I also was showing my proclivities with math and science, and the Seventh-day Adventist school at that time, they weren't interested in math and science. It was, yes, great reading, but your reading is all about reading the Bible.
Yeah.
So great reading program, but it was, we're gonna read the Bible. And I was like, okay, fine. And my mom found another school, and she was not okay with the idea of me being in a public school at all. Even, it could have been a great public school. It's just not going to happen. At least not now. She sent me to a Lutheran school. I was like, oh, okay, that's closer.
Can be better, yeah.
Yeah, it was much, much closer. I'm like, okay, this is closer to what I believe, although the whole Martin Luther thing, you know what, I could get over the Martin Luther thing, but I was in, between SDA and Lutheran, I was in church sometimes anywhere between 3 and 5 times a week, because my grandmother was Catholic, my mom was Catholic, and they wanted me to continue to identify as Catholic and grow up in the Catholic Church. Well, that's fine. Well, that meant that Sundays that I was there for Mass, sometimes Wednesdays, sometimes Fridays, but I was there. But then again, when I was in the SDA system, I was also there as well. So Saturdays and sometimes Thursday nights I was there. I was like, well, I really had I was always in church or reading the Bible or reading something. I remember one of the things that they had us do is it was the 100-verse challenge. Every single year, it was the 100-verse challenge. And this is starting from about the first grade or so. You had to memorize 100 verses and be able to just recite them. Just go. It was...
Wow.
And it was different verses every single year. And you had to remember the ones from the year before. I was like, wow, that's great. And
so you enjoyed that.
Oh, it was wonderful. No, I didn't enjoy none of it.
I thought you were saying you like it. Well, I heard that you wanted to be a priest when you were like 7 or something. So I'm wondering, he like dreading this, or is he like, oh, I'm eating this up?
I was dreading it just because it took so much of my time to do that.
Oh, it sounds horrible.
It was, but I wanted to be a priest. I always wanted to be a priest. In fact, I think as soon as I started crawling, I started saying that, that's what I want the collar. I want the collar. I must have that collar. And up until about the age of 12, 13, everyone just knew, just flat out, Alix is going to be a priest. I don't know how he's going to be able to resolve his love for science and math, but you know what? He'll figure it out. And my response to that is, Galileo figured it out. It's like, you do realize how Galileo's story ended, right? But I was like, okay, but I'm going to figure that out.
And your mom was thrilled about that.
She loved it.
Yeah.
Oh my God. It was her ticket. I would be able to absolve her every day at the pearly gates. It was like, no, you're ready. And I actually did wind up, I'll get to that in this. So that growing up, definitely wanted to do that. But I was in New York. I was in Brooklyn. One of the things about growing up where I did is I had a lot of access to different beliefs and ideas, but not living them. It's odd because there's still high degrees of segregation around the nation. I mean, it's not legal segregation. It's just we either self-segregate or we don't cross those train tracks, those roads, and we don't find each other at the intersections. And so the idea of someone, even in New York, being a non-believer was so new to me, or being of any other religion was still so different to me, that I never had any of my beliefs challenged, just flat out, never. So I'm going to be a priest, no questions asked, and that was it. And it wasn't until I got into high school that I left the borough of Brooklyn, went into the Bronx, went to Bronx High School of Science, and that was a culmination of, we talk about the melting pot. That was melting pot. It wasn't necessarily 100% representative of New York City because they had some statistical issues there as well, demographic challenges. But when you look at what New York was at that time, and we're talking about the 90s, you had, I was rubbing elbows with Christians and Hindu. I ran into my first Jain. I was talking to Sikh. I was interacting with Asian students who were bringing a various amount of Buddhism, etc. And then I ran into my first atheist.
That was in high school.
I was in high school.
Wow.
My first atheist in high school. It took me that long to get there.
So I kind of cut you off when you were talking about that 100 verse challenge and how you dreaded that. Were you going somewhere with that story, and I kind of interrupted it?
Okay. So because of my background, because of seeing a lot of the suffering that we saw, or we dealt with, or we lived, the idea of helping people. The 100 verse challenge was a nightmare. That was just annoying. But what I saw priests and ministers being able to do was very compelling to me. Being able to walk out there in the community. It wasn't about the respect. It was about seeing that grieving mother or widow, usually grieving mother, dealing with their kid either being incarcerated or being killed, etc., and being able to make them feel better. That was something that touched me. Being able to share in some of the beautiful rituals that were there as well was also compelling. baptisms. I looked forward to baptisms. I want to say as soon as I realized what they were, being able to usher kids into the kingdom of God and just being able to see what their futures might look like. That was amazing. So although the 100-verse challenge was annoying, I understood that was going to be part of the job, and being able to quote Bible chapter and verse at any given moment to make someone feel good, or to give someone some type of reassurance. It's like I'm all in for that. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's difficult, but it's worth it for what you're getting, for what you're able to do for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And also we were dealing with refugees. We were dealing with a backlog of people coming in from Haiti, where I'm from, coming in from Haiti, and they were still dealing with a lot of the still humanitarian crisis that plague them today. It was before the earthquake, but still Haiti has had problems for decades, including having a despotic president or a despotic leader. And that's what I saw. I was like, I'm going to be one of those priests that go out there in the community and is active and helping people. That was my passion. Yeah.
Would you say that those were the things that influenced your faith the most, seeing those priests and kind of that compassion, helping people, or was there something else or someone else that you think influenced your faith?
No, that was it. That was the driving force. These little micro supermen that not only could go out there and have that kind of impact on people's lives, being able to heal the sick, and not only that, and it's not literally healing the sick, but if you are so downtrodden that you feel ill and you can just give someone a sip of hope, a sip of faith, and letting them pull from that, it's amazing what that little acknowledgement is going to propel these people to. So that was one. And you could also fight demons. That was actually kind of cool.
Oh, yeah, it's like being a superhero.
Oh, absolutely. It's like, okay, you don't have a cape, you have a collar. That's cool. I will take the collar. And I remember the occasion, because the Catholic Church in Haiti does have a history of voodoo in the background. You can't disassociate the two. And so if you go to a Haitian church, you might see some things that don't necessarily add up when it comes to Roman Catholic orthodoxy. And so we don't do the speaking in tongues in Catholicism. However, you will see that come through. And the question growing up was, okay, so is she actually speaking in tongue, or is she being possessed by a demon? Well, if you understand voodoo orthodoxy, they're one and the same. A demon has possessed her. So I got to see, a priest every once in a while lay hands on a woman and drive out demons. Now, it wasn't technically an exorcism because, of course, those have to be sanctioned, blah, blah, blah. But being able to drive out demons, oh, man. I was 5-6 years old when I saw that the first time. I was like, sign me up for that, too. Oh, yeah.
That's crazy.
I was going to be the superhero Constantine from was it Marvel or DC? I think, yeah. But I was ready. Yep.
That's crazy. I've never seen an exorcism. That seems very Catholic to me. Like I don't think Protestants ever do anything like that. They do crazy stuff because I was Protestant and I know, like I was in the charismatic movement, so slaying in the spirit and all that weird stuff. And
yeah.
But that's wild that you saw that when you're like 5 or 6. I would worry that a child would be traumatized seeing that kind of thing. But I guess,
totally was. Totally was. I know I was.
Traumatized, but
There's
like,
no way.
It had a good effect in a way, though.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because you were like, oh my God, this is really a big deal.
It solidified. It kind of helped solidify what I thought. And seeing that at that age, no kid should see that, but seeing that at that age had a major impact on my faith, which is also one of the reasons why I advocate that maybe you don't take kids into those kinds of environments until they're a little bit older.
Yeah.
Because they are they're extremely susceptible at those ages to those kinds of influences, and it definitely helped shape some of my ideas on what faith and Christianity were.
So as a child and kind of as you grew up, what did God mean to you personally? So you talked a lot about, the compassion for others and seeing these priests do these really great things for people that made you, compelled to want to go that route. What did God mean to you on a personal level?
Well, I had a very personal idea of what God was, because walking through the shadow, walking through the valley of death was a constant for me. I grew up in Brownsville, Brooklyn, not too far from East New York, and that's the area that people like Mike Tyson grew up in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not. I'm like, wow, and you're like, yeah, it's not like a great thing.
No, that's not a good thing. That's not a good thing. And when I went to school, I would have to journey through some of the, we call them projects, but these are housing development for low income or no income families. So in that area, they tend to have extremely high crime rates and really low literacy rates. And it's just some of the pressures and demands that you're going to get with people who have very limited resources. Organisms are going to react in that way. If it's just going to happen.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter where, doesn't matter what race, that's what's going to happen. And me being able to survive that required for me the knowledge that I had either God or angels or people that were protecting me that I didn't see. That had to be it, because I couldn't be that lucky. I couldn't grow up with someone who lived 3 or 4 doors down from me and then see them shot or carried out on a stretcher and then not think that God was there for me.
So
I had to.
You saw that happen.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Wow. So there's like neighbors or friends or things that something would happen, like someone would get shot or there'd be some kind of something like that would happen.
Yeah. In that area, it's one of those statistics of most African men that were had some type of run-in with the law before the age of 21. Wow. And we're talking about incarceration but it was a high poverty rate.
Wow. So it was when you walk through these projects, you said you walk through them going to school?
I would have to walk through them to go to school.
You were pretty fearful as you walked through the projects because anything could happen?
No, I wasn't fearful. I wasn't fearful because I had that I wasn't careless about what I was doing. And of course I wore this uniform, and other kids that went, it was a parochial school. So when I was walking through these neighborhoods, and sometimes I would have it was distance, it was a couple of miles. Now, to get to the bus stop, it was one thing, and going from the bus stop or actually walking to school, it was 2 different projects that I would have to go through. And if it was just going through a bus stop, I felt safe. If the bus or mass transit was not going to be reliable in New York, sometimes that was the case back then, I was walking through the Marcy projects as well. Now, the Marcy projects it's infamous because of people like Jay-Z who talk about growing up in the Marcy projects and selling drugs in the Marcy projects. And walking through those areas, I'm like, okay, I'm going to be safe. I've got some type of divine. I've got some type of divine sight, or something has to be there for me. So I didn't fear the way that I think others who didn't. But I didn't think anyone didn't have belief. Now, it took a lot of arrogance, I think, or hubris to believe that, okay, for some reason I was chosen and the person that I saw die 2 or 3 days ago wasn't. They died, and maybe they didn't believe strong enough, or they didn't believe the way I don't know what it was. And even looking back, I still don't know what it was in that belief system that said, okay, yes, I'm special. I still don't know what that is. That's one of the questions I still struggle with. What exactly was it about me that made me special, or believe that I was so special that even my fellow Christian that was gunned down, why me? I still don't know that.
Well, I think to me, you were young. I mean, I think a lot of young people, especially young religious people of any faith, when something bad happens to someone else, you see it every time a tornado rips through someone's home and the neighbor's like, thank God, thank God I was saved. Thank God, our house wasn't harmed. And we just, as human beings, I mean, these are adults who say this kind of thing now, but yeah, I just think we tend to think that way, especially when we're young. But so your personal relationship with God, the thing that stood out to me from what you said was God was your protector.
Protector and stand-in dad. My dad was, my mom and dad got divorced pretty young, and being able to have at least the archetype of a dad that that loved you so much that he would sacrifice his only son, that resonated with me pretty heavily. So, that combination worked very well for me.
So we're going to jump into like those high school years again. But what else is significant about your life up to that point?
That was it. It was just strong belief. And never being able to question, or never finding it wasn't just the opportunity to question, the need to question. Every once in a while I would have the occasional, okay, the whole garden story, is that really real? I mean, is that allegory? And I got conflicting answers. You go to the SDA, and yeah, that's pretty much cut and dry. That's how it happened. And then when you cross into Catholicism or Lutheranism, or with the Lutherans, it was much more allegorical. I mean, it's and same thing with Judaism. That, and I was like, so I had issues reconciling that. But a lot of the big questions really didn't come to me until the high school years.
High school. So my next question was, can you identify a time when you begin to doubt your beliefs?
Absolutely. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. It was, I think it was actually freshman year, just being exposed to all these different cultures and these ideas. The diversity was almost nauseating. It was dizzying.
That is amazing. I mean, I grew up in a high school with lots of different cultures, Hispanic and African American and Asian. I mean, there was a lot, but I mean, what you described, I mean, that's like times 10. It was absolutely dizzying. I mean, I went from Brooklyn I would go from Brooklyn to Manhattan pretty regularly, but it was still a different world because you're going from your neighborhood into the big city. And it's not, you're not the country bumpkin, but, Brooklyn is not Manhattan. It's not that kind of bustle, or, it wasn't then. Some areas now, absolutely. But it was just a different world. And so when I got into high school and seeing all of these kids that were coming from, Manhattan, the Bronx, every single borough out there, it was every culture that I could think of that made this idea of the melting pot very real. And so I'm there, and I'm interacting with kids, and I'm so sure I'm Christian. I'm confident. I have my Bibles with me. I would read them on the train. Every once in a while, people would start having real conversations with me about that, and I fell right into line with the other Christians. Really easy. We found each other really quick. It wasn't very difficult. You find the other black kids there, and like, oh, look, yeah, we can talk about it. Yeah, we can. However, it was a school for science and math. It was Bronx High School of Science, which was a magnet school for science and math. And I should have known that I would occasionally find those people that, that had really deep, insightful questions that I wasn't prepared for. And I think it was right about the
it didn't take long in freshman year, where I started getting challenged on just basic concepts of contradiction. Just I'm trying to remember his name, but it was, he was a senior, and he's like, oh yeah, I used to be a Christian. How can you believe that? Blah blah blah. I'm like, well, I mean, how can you not? Is my question, and his response is, okay, well, with the 500 plus contradictions, no, there's no such thing as a contradiction, and you just don't understand. And as he started to pick apart the story, the narrative that I had written in my head, I really started to wonder, one, whether I was really prepared for these kinds of discussions, and maybe I should just start listening more rather than challenging. And that was something that I had not been, that's not something I had been accustomed to, which is interesting to hear, given that that's all you do is you sit in school or you sit in class and all you do is listen. You don't challenge in Sunday school. You don't challenge in Bible schools. You can ask questions for clarification that solidify your belief or confirm your biases, but you never really challenged anything. And here I was being told that I did exactly that. All you're doing is you're repeating stuff. You're parroting what someone told you. Did you ever think about this? Come on, you're in a science and math school. You have to develop some form of critical reasoning. And that was a little shattering for me. And so, I put up the Bibles for a little bit and started talking to people. I still considered myself a Christian. I was still going to church every week. I was still Catholic. Mm-hmm. That slowed down for a little bit about sophomore year, where I really started having problems with the question of evil, right? It was the moral argument. Does your God really support the slaughter, the rape, etc.? I'm like, wait a minute. How can I call myself a moral person and worship a God that I'm finding that doesn't have the same morals? And I'm being told in church week after week that God is the source of all morality. Well, if God is the source of all morality, then isn't he the source of all immorality and the source of all evil as well? Even if you think about who and what was fallen, he's the source of it all. And if that's true, are we really just arguing about just circumstance at that point? And is there this God creator who is still not just omnipotent, but active in my life? And I became really conflicted, and I really thought that I wasn't on my path to atheism at that point. I was on my path to studying other religions, and maybe I didn't interpret my readings properly, what I was told properly. And it was about junior year that I started to toy with Islam. And there was a wonderful Shia family that was kind of willing to take me under their arm, junior and senior year, where I actually started learning Arabic. They got me my first Quran. I still have it. And we started to delve really deep into Islam. And I found, okay, maybe the story of Christianity was where it really stopped for me in freshman, sophomore year. And I needed to continue with this story that continued because, of course, God is always evolving with us. We're evolving with God. And that's how I was able to make that work. Like, okay, so let's pick up after Jesus and see how we get into Muhammad and we continue. Now that didn't work very well for my mom, but she was accepting of it because I still believed in something.
So the problem of evil is what got you thinking about your Christianity. So I'm wondering, as you go to Islam, are you thinking, well, is this Muslim God also the same as the Christian God? Did you think like, oh, well, the Muslim God, maybe they're not Maybe he's not as like bloodthirsty as the Old Testament God.
Well, yeah, at the time it wasn't. I mean, they're the same God. We just call it different names, but it's the same God. And what I thought is maybe there were more teachings. I don't know that I even believe that I could escape the problem of evil.
You were just searching.
I was searching for more answers that might inform me on why that problem existed.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, let me do Islam. And part of it was, I know there was some level of dissonance there, because I'm like, it was scary. It was scary. It was, and there were some doors that I found myself getting very close to that second year of belief, that I was like, do I believe any of this? I was like, I don't even want to go there. I don't want to open that door. I do not want to open that door.
It's very unsettling.
It would undo me. Not just unsettling. It would undo me. I would, So I went through my stage in Islam, and I got to the end of it in about my second year. It took about 2 years of Islam.
But you said your mom was a little tentative, but she was accepting of it.
She was accepting of it because I believed in something, and at the most basic level, it's the same God. And okay, maybe it's a phase. Not wound up being a phase. It did what that particular
that
part
was a phase. Yeah,
it was a phase. I guess all of my 20 years of Christianity ago. But it was a phase, and I came out of that, and my grandmother, I remember a conversation with my grandmother at the end of this, and she said, maybe you weren't praying hard enough. You didn't understand Christian teachings well enough. And so I decided at the end of that year that I'm like, okay, I really wasn't focused on my studies intently enough. I really wasn't living the Christian life hard enough. So I threw myself back in. Head first, no holds barred, signed up at St. John's Divinity. And I was like, I'm going to do this. I always wanted to be a priest. I'm going to be a priest. I'm going to do this.
And is this right after high school, or is this?
Right after high school.
Okay. Graduated, and then divinity school is like, that's not like a bachelor's degree. That's just a divinity school.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was actually a long program. I was going to do that and Columbia at the same time. And I'm like, I'm going to do this. And it took less than a year. And I was like, I don't believe any of this. I'm done. It took less than a year.
I won't say that fast, but it really wasn't fast. I mean, from that point, that year, that's fast.
Yeah. That year. Because I was, I want to say, as soon as we started reading the Bible and dissecting it, and I was able to ask the questions that were really unsettling to me, even as a child, I began to see the business of religion. And that was a problem for me. That was a major problem for me.
What do you mean by that?
The question of when we started talking about how the Bible even came to be, and the different councils and the different varying edits to the Bible, and trying to make the Bible work, the historicity of the Bible, that was a big problem for me. That was because I had never really thought of it. I never thought of it. Like,
they essentially voted on which books should get in and which shouldn't, and it was like really close, and then they're like, okay, that's heresy now.
Yes. I was like, wait a minute, what do you mean? This is supposed to be the inspired word of God. I mean, how can this be?
You probably had never thought about how it came to be to that point.
No, absolutely not. Exactly. I was like, it was just always there. It was just always there. Even when I was in high school and I was thinking about the ideas of monotheism and challenging them with the other ideas, I never found it to be a problem. Okay, so exactly how was the Bible made? And so we'll talk about the councils. And at Columbia University, they actually had copies of some of the manuscripts. I got into some of the manuscripts myself, and I can't remember the teacher's name. I took a course, And I remember sitting there, I was like, okay, this is the contextual analysis, and this is how many of the Dr. Richard Carrier now talks about some of the contextual analysis that he's done, same university. And I'm like, okay, this is some of the stuff that was beginning to really bother me as growing up. And okay, so people are guessing at this point with these different versions of the Bible what they think, and they're making it say what they want it to say. And I got a little bit of the same thing through divinity, where when we were challenging the story of creation again, don't focus on that story. You're focusing on themes and not the actual story. You're trying to give people what they need, what they want from this. You're trying to feed their soul. It's not about the story. So it's like you're telling me to cherry pick and just make it work based on reading your audience is what I'm hearing. You go out there, read your audience, and see what works for that particular congregation.
And tell them what they want to hear?
And tell them what they want to hear.
Wow.
I was like, okay, yeah, this is, I remember people calling it, the hustle in high school. I'm like, no, that's.
Oh, referring to the church.
To the church, yeah, to the church as one of the biggest hustles. And I'm like, no, I can't. I'm not a hustler. I'm trying to help people. I'm trying to heal people. I'm trying to, and I walked away from that calling myself spiritual but not religious, because I still had this belief in something there that was bigger than me. And that's also part of growing up in the African American community. There's always something bigger than you, whether it's the church itself, whether you believe in God or not. The church is bigger than you. Your ancestors are bigger than you. Your everything out there is bigger than you. So it's just there as a constant.
So it's like the hustle, learning that the church is kind of, I don't know, actually learning or seeing that maybe it is a hustle as you go through. It was divinity school, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you're going through divinity school and you're realizing, okay, it does kind of look like a hustle. You're telling people what they want to hear. It's not about literally if Adam and Eve actually were in the garden. It's about, hey, let's teach a moral story that makes people feel good. Is that?
Yeah. And it's.
And that would bother any person who has a conscience.
Yeah. Well,
I would think.
Yes, I would think. I think other people that were there were, may have gotten something else out of it, but that's what I got out of it, and that wasn't very fulfilling. Oh, and when I walked away, I felt even more broken than when I went in.
You were looking for something to make it better, and then you come out feeling worse.
It was really bad. And I went through some level of depression as well, because here I had my entire belief system turned upside down. And I had thrown myself so far into it that I had to make the jump that I was going to leave my doubts behind, cast my doubts, and trample on reason, and jump headfirst into this. At the end of it, believing that, or coming to the conclusion that I had wasted so much of my time just following this, where I could have been really helping people, just flat out in other ways. I had already been a community organizer. I'd been out there helping people. I didn't need this to do that. And yeah, the idea of spiritual but not religious, because I needed some level of connection to this thing that was bigger than me, that was greater than us all. And listening to, I told my mom this, and she was not okay with this, but accepted the idea, kind of. I believe in something. I don't believe in organized religion. I think I believe in a God, but not in what you're defining as God, not what we've been taught. And I go through this period for a few years. Now, at that time, I I had just gotten married.
And up to that time, had you confided in anybody about these feelings you were having as you went through divinity school?
No. I couldn't. Doing that.
Like, who's going to understand what you're going through, right?
Right. Who's going to understand that? And if I start saying stuff like that in my community, it's one thing to be excommunicated out of the church, but having the same process, in your society, in your community, that's what would have happened back then. I was pretty sure that what was going to happen. I would have secluded myself from any mate selection, having children and not having them in a church, that would have been, that would have killed them. They would have never had friends. I mean, all the other resources that you get.
It's almost like social suicide.
It is social suicide. That's exactly what it was. It was social suicide. I was not gonna do that. And then I actually got married in a church.
So at that point, you didn't believe, and you were saying you did tell your mom.
I told my mom that I was spiritual but not religious.
Okay. But that wasn't true. You actually were atheist at that point?
I refuse to use that word. Why
is that, Alex? Atheist is a totally fine word.
No way was I going to use that word not then. No way.
And up to that point, was there anything keeping you holding on to your belief in God? I mean, this is going back a little bit, but yeah.
Not really with the belief in God, except the ideas of, I had a fear of being outed, I guess. I had a fear of acknowledging, even verbally, what I believed or no longer believe. But, so I would go through, people would say, you want to go to church with me? I'm like, oh, yeah, sure, I'll go to church with you. And I would go. I mean, it was just a place at that time, right? I'll go with you. And for African Americans, we have a lot of the ability to connect with people, not just the human connections, but business connections, opportunities out in the community.
Yeah.
When I came down, and that was me growing up in New York. When I came down to Texas, and I walked into, I'm in corporate America, so I walked into my office, and the very first thing that came out of somebody's mouth is, "Oh, you came from New York?" Yeah, and I just moved down there. One of the first questions people ask, "Have you found a church yet?" I'm like, really? How is that appropriate in this setting at all? It's totally okay because,
it's normal down there, I guess.
It's the South, exactly. It's totally normal.
Wow.
Yeah.
But yeah, getting back to your mom, because I kind of jumped back a little bit. But so you told her you were spiritual but not religious, and how'd she take that?
Spiritual but not religious. That was a phase. I mean, it was just like your Muslim phase. That's just a phase. You'll be fine. We all have doubts. You all have doubts. I remember having this conversation with my longtime priest, and in Brooklyn, and I sat down and said, I'm really at a point in my life I don't know what to do. And of course, he's my boyhood priest, and Father Peyton. I remember him, Father Peyton. And I said, Father Peyton, what do I do? And he said, we all have doubts. We all have these crises of faith. You just keep working at it. And he said, and he tells me, I think every Catholic priest has the story of, I went through the same period, and look at me, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Look at me now. Look at me now.
It's gonna be fine.
It's gonna
just
be
keep
fine.
going.
Yeah. And I even, every question I ever had about religion, I asked him, and he gave me the most honest answers that I'm sure they were honest to him. I'm absolutely sure they were honest to him.
Yeah.
Is this story real? It's like, nah, no one actually believes that, but it's a metaphor. It's an allegory. Okay, fine. But what about this and that? It's like, you know what? Don't live your life according to what other people are telling you. What do you feel? Because God, even through the inspired word, God is inspiring you to do things, and you have the facilities to do this. It was great advice. A lot of it was great advice. Had nothing to do with religion. It really did. I mean, if if you separated it all, it had nothing to do with the teachings. Like just a good guy giving me advice. And telling my mom that I was spiritual but not religious, it was really just a phase, and I would be back. And I don't know that I believed that I wouldn't be back. I was pretty sure I was done, but I had just really started grasping with the idea, coping with the idea of my life being turned upside down.
Mm-hmm.
And what was hard for me is not saying that, all these people lied to me for years upon years. And I was like, well, they didn't know that they were lying. They believed it, and it was true. It's not really lying. It's this, you're just looking at it through a different set of lenses. And that was difficult.
So what was the most difficult part of that time of your life?
That part was living the lie, not being able to really say that I really don't believe it. When I took the Eucharist, that was really, really hard. I'm going to jump forward until for a second, because when my grandmother died, one of the most scandalous things that happened when we went through the whole funeral was it was done in a Catholic church and said mass, and this woman died at 92 years old, long life. The only thing that people were talking about is how her grandson, the wannabe priest, didn't go take the Eucharist. That was the scandal. Why is Alix,
instead of talking about her life,
talking about her life? At the end of it, instead of talking about about her life, it's like, why did Alix not go up there and take? That's
sad.
It was, and part of me was thinking, like, we've got to be beyond this at this point. And I said, I'm not going to do that. My grandmother would have told me, just be who you are, and be unapologetically you. She was unapologetically her, and I'm probably close. I was closer to my grandmother than anyone else on the planet, and everyone knew it. I mean, when she died, it rocked my world. So me doing that was what people took away from that, and I thought that was really sad. I thought that was really, really sad.
That is really sad.
Yeah.
So what, as you went through living the lie, that was the most difficult thing.
Living the lie was hard, and having, getting married, having children, and
how old were you about this time? I'm trying to put in perspective.
I was in my early 20s at this time.
Okay, so you're married, and that's when you're essentially deconverted at that point. You're still kind of struggling, but
and I'm not using the word. And my wife is Christian, and my wife is Christian, and and we're going through this thing, and
she knows about your struggles at that point?
She knows about my struggles, but again, it's just a phase. It was just a phase. I'm like, we have 2 children together at that point, and I don't think it's a phase. I'm pretty sure it's not a phase. And she was Christian, not highly religious. She wasn't a holy roller, but the idea of, we still have to go to church. Okay, it doesn't have to be every week if you're not going to be comfortable. Not every week, but every few weeks, I expect you there. I'm like, I'll do it. And it still was a need. There was still a need to connect these children into the community. I'm like, okay, they still need some level of connection, and I'm good with that. And eventually there was enough strife. There was enough friction that her and I grew apart, and we wound up first separating, and then we got a divorce. And that was that was a very difficult time for me, who didn't think the idea of divorce was never palatable to me. Being Catholic, that.
So on top of all of what you've gone through personally with religion and your personal life, you have to go through this divorce, which, I mean, that's extremely difficult just on its own. So now this is compounding everything.
Yes. Still not using the word atheist. Still not using the word. They went through my divorce. Still not using the word atheist. I was a single dad with the 2 kids at the time. Still not using the word atheist. Did start to move away from the church, although I had friends who were still there. Started to open up to them just a little bit. Still not using the word atheist. Mm-hmm. And then September 11th happened. September 11th happened. September 12th. I'm an atheist. Don't call me anything else. I'm an atheist. Remember, I'm a New Yorker. So
that's very personal. As an American, but as a New Yorker especially.
As a New Yorker. I was in Texas. We were living there. I remember the call. It was a friend in Austin called me up and said, "Hey, are you watching TV?" I'm like, "No, what am I missing?" She's like, "Turn on to the news and First Tower had just been hit." And I'm like, "What am I watching?" And we're watching the report on it together. And then goes the second tower.
Did you see it happen?
Oh yeah. We
saw the second plane hit.
We saw the second plane hit. And then I'm sitting there. I'm like, okay, I need to hang up because my mom went through the tower every single day for 5 days. Yeah, every single day, because she was going from Brooklyn to Manhattan. People worked. At that time, nobody worked in Brooklyn. They lived in Brooklyn. You go to work in Manhattan. And I was like, wait, this is about the time that she would be heading into Lower Manhattan through the center. And I mean, every day when I was going to high school, every single day I was going through World Trade Center every single day. So I'm thinking, wait, not only do I need to call my mom, I have a list of friends and relatives. And oh my God, is my cousin okay? And what about those people I knew at Lehman or IBM? And just all of the questions started hitting me. And I didn't even think about the firefighters and in my family. I'm like, oh. And I got off the phone with her and started calling, and unfortunately, because the cell towers also went down, 911 went down, going into trying to get communications in New York was almost impossible. Coming in from the outside, we could not find a whole lot of people, and I was allowed to fly into New York. Yes, allowed to fly into New York on one of the first flights in to New York
after they had shut down all flights.
Yeah, all flights were. It
was like a day or two, wasn't it?
It was. Yeah, it was. I flew in on the 13th.
Okay.
And September 11th happened. Could not find people. I'm like, sleep is not even an option for me, right? I'm calling in favors. I'm asking people to drive places if and people are offering to, we'll get there. We'll go find your mom. We'll go find your whoever. And I'm not getting answers. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to get on a plane. And I had a really good friend at the time, her and a couple of friends. Like, look, you leave the kids here. You and Michelle go get on the plane and you go see who you could find and hopefully you can find everyone you need to. Well, unfortunately, that wasn't the case. But I remember flying into the city, walking down Church Avenue, and getting to Vesey and seeing people that I would have normally run up to had I had my collar, run up to and try and console. And the first question that they would have had is why? Now, I had gone through Christian teachings and Islam. And if you understand why September 11th happened, whether you buy into various narratives, you understand the justification, the post-justification, post-Islamic justification for it, you can see how that would be justified under Islam. Radical ideas of Islam. Yeah. Right then and there, I said, I don't have to figure out how to make this work for anybody. I've got people who are in real pain, really suffering, I don't have to tell them when they ask me, why did this happen? I don't have to justify it for their God. I just don't. It was the first time in my life that I said, oh my God, I'm so happy I'm not a priest right now. I'm so happy I'm not a priest right now. Because how would I be able to sit there and defend this? There's just no way.
Wow.
And I had people, I mean, we cried together. It was a highly emotional, not just a highly emotional week, but highly emotional year for a lot of people. And I sat there and I remember people kneeling and praying. And I told them, I will kneel with you. I will not pray with you. I will hold your hand. I will cry with you. I will look with you. I have pictures. You have pictures. Let's go. Let's keep looking. It was hard, but I didn't have the burden of belief, a burden of God that was sitting there with me. And that probably would have been the very first time that I would have felt God as a real burden, my belief system as a real burden, instead of something that's leaving. Now I know a lot of people will use it as a way to, to feel better. But for me, it would have done the exact opposite. And that's when I unapologetically, never anyone ever asked, what do you believe? I'm an atheist. Go ahead, challenge me. I dare you. I dare you. You can ask that question now. You really can? Oh, okay. Yeah.
Wow. Did you know anybody? How were your relatives and friends? Was anybody in the tower? Or?
Oh yeah, we lost a few, and between we actually lost a firefighter as well, which was a big surprise to us because look, wait a minute, why is a Brooklyn firefighter missing? And then it's like, wait, it's Brooklyn. You live in Brooklyn, but you go to work in Manhattan. It's right across the bridge, and so we also lost a firefighter. But yeah, we lost a few people that day, friends and relatives. But wow. I mean, it's hard for anyone who is a New Yorker who has roots in New York to say that it's very hard for them to say that they weren't impacted somehow from what happened.
Yeah, even if you didn't know somebody, and Americans in general. I mean, it was so emotional and such a shock. I mean, I remember feeling up to that point in my life that like we're the strongest, biggest, baddest country. I was still really Christian at that time. And so this happens and it's like, we've been attacked? Like what? Like Pearl Harbor wasn't a thought in my mind. That was way a long time ago. I didn't think about the fact that we'd been attacked before as Americans.
Yeah,
but when that happened, it was like this illusion that we're invincible. It just ended for me.
Yeah.
During this time in your life, I don't know, this can include the, 9/11 and stuff, but I'm thinking more kind of up to that point. What was the most helpful thing as you were kind of coming out of your faith and becoming atheist? What was the most helpful thing for you? What helped you get through?
For me, it was finding solace in books and in reading. At the time, I still didn't know too many people, and I had let's fast forward a little bit, and I remarry, and my wife was agnostic. I was like, okay, I can work with an agnostic.
You can work with that?
I can work with that. I can work with agnostic. You don't have to be an atheist, but agnostic. Okay, I could work with that. And we were looking for something like a church. It's like, is there anything like a church that we could connect? Because we're still missing this support structure, and still have these kids, and I really would like them to have friends. I don't want them ostracized. I want them to be able to connect with kids of like mind. And the UUs were Unitarian Universalist. That was just a little bit too much for me at the time. I was like, I don't know if I can do that. But we found it was an atheist church. Now, back then the idea was just that that doesn't happen. Atheist churches, that doesn't happen. Well, there have been several who have cropped up over the last few years. You have the Oasis groups, you have the ethical societies that are kind of sort of like that, and what have you. And I got on a plane and I came back home one day and she said, I found it. I think I found a place for us to connect. And that's when I became very comfortable, really comfortable with who I was. Being able to go out there and talk to people and connect offline. And this is one of the things I tell Black non-believers who are in areas that, are not very populated by non-believers. Connect online. Find those people. Find those groups. I didn't have them at the time. Find those groups and find some form of human connection really quickly. If you need to get it off your chest, whatever anger, questions, hate that you might be harboring, whatever it is, loneliness, it doesn't matter. Find a way to connect with someone online, and as soon as you can, go find someone offline, because that connection, that touch, being able to sit across from someone and have those conversations will help you find yourself really quick. I mean, especially if you're new. I came from that science, math background, so being able to jump into one of Dawkins' books, or even some of the Sam Harris, was very influential right after 9/11. I read End of Faith. It was the End of Faith. And that one really was a very, very powerful read at the time. And that satisfied some of my belief structure, but it didn't satisfy the need of going out there and helping people, because I still had this compulsion for service. I still had to work with churches to a certain extent to go out there and feed the homeless, or do the drives that are necessary to show that compassion, just because they have the infrastructure that secular groups at the time did not.
When you said you had to, you mean personally, you had to be involved in some kind of humanitarian?
Yes, personally. Yes.
Yeah, and so you were compelled to do that. And of course, like you said, the infrastructure is the church. I mean, the church is the one, they're out there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I have a problem with hunger, and children being hungry is, I remember what hunger is. I occasionally fast to remind myself what hunger is. And deal with that, so that I can get up and I go out there, and whether it's with a Baptist church, I'm not going to lie about who I am. Of course, they know who I am now. If they're willing to work and build coalitions, and accept the fact that that I am an atheist, and the groups that I'm with are atheist or secular groups. If you're okay with that, then we can hold hands and go do this together. Occasionally we find the ones that want absolutely nothing to do with us. It's like you do realize that we're bringing resources that can help literally feed the homeless, or
we're helping do God's work here in their mind. Yeah, in their mind. I mean, I remember one group that told us, we had just one stipulation. It was like, can we focus on feeding those people and not proselytizing? And I remember this minister / politician saying, if I don't get to do that, then I want nothing to do with it. I mean, that's the whole reason we're doing this. But you're feeding the hungry so you can proselytize? I was like, okay. And that, believe it or not, over the last few years, I've run into that several times, which doesn't surprise me. It would surprise other people. It doesn't surprise me anymore. But it's still a gut punch, because that's, Yeah. You said that your wife found a group. What was the name of the group?
So at the time, it was the North Texas Church of Freethought, which was a fairly small group, and we went out there. It was predominantly white, middle class, atheist, I'm like, I'm okay with that. I live it in corporate America. I live it in my current neighborhood, etc. And it wasn't very diverse, but it was a great meeting place for people. And we wound up finding several families that wanted to focus a little bit more on the children, and we created a different group, and that became the Fellowship of Freethought, which wound up becoming the largest single freethought group in not only North Texas. I think we may be pushing in all of Texas at this point.
Cool.
And we're talking about thousands of freethinkers that that call themselves Texas freethinkers, atheists, agnostics,
and they gather on a regular basis.
Yeah, we gather on a very regular basis. We have a larger gathering every month. Third Wednesday, we get together, and you'll get anywhere between you can get 100 to 150 people that show up at any given gathering. But during the week, they're fairly active as well. So you'll find pub nights on different parts of town, and we have all these wonderful little neighborhood events, and people connect. We brought Camp Quest to Texas
very cool.
through that organization, and I think they said that Camp Quest Texas had for 2 years had the single largest camper numbers for 2 years, which is weird, right? I mean, it's Texas, but you got like 100 and something kids, and camp in Texas. Mm-hmm. So much so that I think this year they've got 2 camps going on this year in Texas just to deal with the overflow.
Yeah.
And 5 years ago, when we first brought it in here, brought it to Texas, I think we had less than 10 kids, and just every single year.
Wow, starting with 10, and now you got hundreds.
Yeah, and I think it was even less than 10 kids, honestly, but I think it was about 10 kids.
5 children in all of Texas.
Yeah.
To start out, yeah.
Yeah, it's like they're 5 kids and they're all mine. Yeah, that was Camp Quest. No, we had it was about 3 or 4 families, and that was it. We brought Camp Quest to Texas for that one day thing. The next year was like 20 some odd kids. It was small, and then 50, 60, 80, and then 100, and I think it was 100. And 2 years ago, when I was a volunteer, we had either 98 or 100 kids.
That's
and
cool.
Then last year they had more than that, to the point where it's like, okay, it's so big that we need two separate events for camp.
Mm-hmm. It's blowing up all over the country. That's great to hear.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. So do people misunderstand your deconversion or atheism? Christians in particular?
Yeah, they do. I think a lot of them will tell me that I was angry at God. I'm like, no, I really wasn't. They hear the 9/11 thing and it's like, oh, you were just angry at God. It's like, no, I knew that I was an atheist beforehand. I was just okay with saying it.
Like that was like exclamation point on the end of it.
Oh yeah. Oh yes. It went from a shaded gray, scarlet A to a big bright red, and just like, yeah, look at that. I'll polish it in front of you. There you go. I think people do because they don't understand what atheism is. I often find myself correcting people on the idea of, oh, so you're a Satan worshiper. Like, no, that's not it. Do you really? They really asked me if I believe that do you eat babies?
What?
And that one, okay,
Someone seriously asked that question?
Seriously asked that question. It's like, do you eat babies? It's like, and are you kidding? You're serious right now? Like, yeah, totally serious. I've had people that have they said, can we do something? This one was great. Someone said, can we do something, because we want to see something. I'm like, okay, what are you going to do? And about 3 of them came around me and laid their hands on me, because they were sure that they were going to cast out a demon. And right then and there, I was going to spontaneously be filled with the Spirit of the Lord and I was going to renounce my atheism, and the demon was going to be out, and I was going to be Christian again, and I'd be fine, and I'll be saved, etc. People are always writing me, telling me, we're praying for you. I'm like, oh, okay, whatever.
Keep praying. It's fine with me. How I want that story to end is you made your eyes roll back in your head and you started convulsing and just feed into it. Give them what they want. Right, Alex? Like your divinity teaching. Give them what they want.
You know what? I was like, man, I wish I had, an Alka-Seltzer. I would have popped that in my mouth and just started frothing. And just, it would have never. Oh, yeah. And at the end of that, I was like, just playing.
Yeah, just mess around. I got to go grab lunch. Anyone want to come? That's really funny.
I've had the most absurd questions that have come out over the last few years that I've been doing it.
Yeah.
My son actually, I got picked on because I got picked on because I was a Catholic in a Protestant school. My son, and this is we're talking about Camp Quest a few years ago. The year that it came out, came to Texas. Mm-hmm. It was big news. It was huge news. Camp Quest in Texas. Yeah, and the way that the news framed it is they're coming for your kids. Right? That's just the way it was. I'm like, are you kidding? I watched that and I'm like, I mean, it was Fox News and CBS, and we had all three major networks there. But the Fox News coverage was just like, yeah, they're coming for your kids. I'm like, really? Anyway, my son was, I think, about 13, 14 years old. And they asked parents, like, is it okay if we interview any of your kids? I'm like, my son being one of the older ones, I'm like, yeah, sure. Let's go. If he's okay with it, mm-hmm. I will let him do it. And
how old was he at the time?
He was 13 or 14 years old. I think it was about, yeah. And I sat with him and I said, this could come back to you. Yeah, this could come back. And he said, no, Dad, I want to do it. And so he does it. And I'm like, are you sure you want to do this? And he was pretty positive. And he went and he did it. He gave this wonderful, beautiful answer. Someone asked him, well, what do you think happens when you die? So, well, you just die. And, well, what do you want to happen when you die? It's like, well, I personally would love to have my body put out into the ocean, and my flesh eaten by feed other organisms, and whatever's left over becomes part of the coral out there, becomes part of the reef. That's just the beauty. I had never heard him actually say this story, and I'm watching him and I'm like, that's actually that's beautiful. I'm like, I actually like that. I mean, that's really nice. And that part of that makes it onto the interview. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe it's not going to be that bad. And camp was in August. We don't hear anything. He goes back to school. September, nothing. I'm like, okay, good. Nothing in September. October, nothing. I'm like, we made it. All right, fine.
He's in the clear.
Yes. Christmas. Well, the video is being showed at a couple of churches so that they can talk about the secular incursion and how they're coming for your kids. Here's an example of how they're brainwashing your kids. They're coming for you. And that resulted in a few kids roughing him up in school. Right, roughing him up in school. And I wound up, the school did everything that they had to do, needed to do, and I don't blame the school at all. But I said, you know what, maybe I need to pull him from school for a little bit, and yeah, we did, and he was homeschooled for, and then we got him into a secular co-op, and then back into high school, etc. But I had to pull him from that school because the idea of what they said was, you're black. How can you be an atheist? How can you not love Jesus? And it bothered me for a really long time, because I'm like, this is at the beginning of my activism, my atheist activism, my secular activism. And I was upset at those kids, and then I had to stop being upset at those kids because they didn't know any better. And that's what got me really motivated on talking about Black atheism. Because we were fine with being atheists. You know, you're a non-atheist, you're whatever, you're theist. Do you? But if I'm not actively going out there and showing these kids and everyone else that there is a real alternative, and there always has been. We have historical figures who were secular, non-believers, non-Christians, who denounced the church. Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurst. I mean, we had many. A. Philip Randolph, who was very active in the civil rights movement. Bayard Rustin, amongst others, who were really active in organizing around MLK. But all you hear is about MLK, which is part of that whole cultural coherence, that identity of what it means to be Black in America. Well, there's another story. So that's when I decided that I had to go out there and present not just the case for atheism, but the fact that it's always been there. And that's when I really, really got active.
The thought that here these kids are roughing up your son, like how hurtful that is anyway, and you want to blame someone, because I'd be pissed as a dad, you know, if that happens. It's like, you want to blame someone, you're angry, but then to be insightful enough to go, you know what, any group of kids in this culture, in this religious culture we live in that environment, would probably react in a similar way. I mean, it's the culture we live in. And so we can get angry at that group of kids and put the blame squarely on them. And then, of course, you know, they are to blame. But the bigger picture, which is what I think you're getting at, is people have to get out there and start showing, being an activist, being in the spotlight to show, hey, listen, you know, this is an okay lifestyle. I mean, we just don't believe what you do. We're still good people, because you have to change how people perceive atheists. You meaning all of us. We all need to change the perception so that kind of thing stops happening. Yeah. So last set of questions here are just about some of your reflections and thoughts on things. So, you know, I think back to, you know, you started with, you know, the early years and kind of, I were a Christian, kind of went through high school, started having doubts, and then, you know, you go to divinity school, and then 9/11 happens, you deconvert. That's a huge change, you know, for a person to go through. I mean, an identity change. What about you through all those years do you think stayed the same?
The one thing that's definitely stayed the same is my compassion, and wanting to go out there and help people. And what I've learned is that I didn't need any label to go out there and help people. I thought at one point they were synonymous. Christian means helping people. And I learned that that wasn't necessarily the case or wasn't required. You can be an apostate, you can be a non-believer, you can be an apostate like me of many faiths, and go out there and feed and clothe and do, quote unquote, God's work without ever acknowledging or believing in a God. So that was one of my big takeaways. But I think what's been the same is my commitment to humanity.
That's really cool. When you think back on the Christian you, what do you think about that person now?
My Christian me, it's easy to look back at my Christian me and make fun of the gullibility, make fun of that particular worldview, make fun of the obvious cognitive dissonance or several dissonances that were there and necessary for me to exist in not only a secular world, but in a technological world that I was going to contribute to. in a science-driven world that I was going to contribute to, and actively look at these wonderful standards of evidence that drove that particular form of thinking, and yet somehow make religion work for me in the back. I think in retrospect, I had a lot of conflicts, and I've been able to get to a point in my world where my logic and my worldview is significantly more congruent, and I found a lot more peace because of it.
What do you like best about being an atheist?
I like the accountability. I love the accountability. When I do something, when I hurt someone, I have to find a way to make it right. I have to find a way to forgive. If I'm forgiving, it's a me thing. I'm not asking someone else to do it. This vicarious redemption thing doesn't work for me. It is, as a Christian, I remember, you've got this burden. How do you deal with this burden? You have to give it over to someone else. And I don't have to deal with that idea anymore. I can look at me and say, no, this was my fault. I get to be a grown-up here. I get to find myself to be as accountable as I want to hold myself. It's not just hedonism or nihilism, etc. No, we've got a fixed amount of time. We don't know what it is on this tiny rock. And I'm going to find a way to contribute. And if I can't, that's all my fault. There's something actually very liberating about that, because instead of being dictated and told this is what you need to do, going through the functions of figuring that out for yourself and then doing it and implementing it, being able to say that I did it because of me or for them and instead of because I was told to, I think that's really powerful.
That is really powerful. It's like an alternative to, like you said, being told by a divine power, this is how this is what you need to do. You're just taking orders versus it's coming from the heart.
Yeah.
Name one thing that you learned or experienced that you may not have if you were still a Christian.
That's a tough one. I think I did a lot of my learning as a Christian. I think if I was still a Christian, the idea of vicarious redemption would still be plaguing me. If I had not gotten to the point of, I don't want to say that it's a non-issue, but I know a lot of Christians can get to the point where they look at vicarious redemption and still say, yeah, but that doesn't mean that you're not responsible or you won't be held accountable for your actions. It just means that at the end of it, you are forgiven. Well, that's a lot of mental gymnastics that you have to go through to make that still work. And if that's true, then why have the idea of vicarious redemption at all if there are just these degrees? And then again, you have to go through this massive filter. So as an atheist, I get to say, no, I get to meet these ideas, these problems, these grievances head on without any kind of intervention or rationalization to make things work for me.
So you're saying that what you're able to learn and experience now as an atheist is you get to see the world without having to make theological excuses for bad things that happen or theological reasons for doing good works. You get to experience the world as a human being helping other human beings.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
When you think about your deconversion experience, what are you most proud of?
I think being able to keep it together.
That's an accomplishment.
that is an accomplishment. I think, being able to keep it together, going through this wild ride of, almost a cult-like indoctrination within the Seventh-day Adventist group. It's a very small religion, and it is highly rigorous. And being able to survive that go through all the twists and turns and being able to shoot out the back, and being able to say that I challenged what I believed, and I kept looking, I kept searching. A lot of people will just give up and just accept, or they won't look. And that's one of my biggest problems is why do you believe what you think you believe, and do you believe what you think you believe? Are always questions that come up in these discussions, and my response is, I've gone through that process. I know how I got here. Do you?
Have they thought about it? Have they thought it through?
Yeah.
A lot of times they haven't. So is there anything we haven't discussed that you want to say or talk about?
I think we got everything.
We've canvassed it, yeah.
Yeah.
A to Z.
A to Z, and I think I threw in a couple of numbers just to, just in addition.
Yeah.
So A to Z and a couple of 1s and 3s.
There you go. Well, I started this podcast for the recently deconverted Christian. What piece of encouragement or guidance would you give that person?
Oh, wow. It gets better. It so gets better. And I think we've already reached the tipping point. A couple of people disagree with me and say, no, we still have a few more before we can actually reach the tipping point. But if you look at the numbers, you look at the survey, America is becoming more secular. The world may not be. We take a look at Africa and some of the highly populated areas, and we're seeing increased growth with Islam and Christianity. Yes, that's true. But you take a look at the Western world, it's becoming increasingly secular. We're looking at, 51% or so in the UK. We're looking at the Netherlands, which religion basically doesn't exist. Even when you go out into Western Europe, actually Eastern Europe, the idea of religion is more cultural than anything else. It's not really active. So we're seeing a lot of the same paradigm shift in the U.S., where, yes, you will still have the Joel Osteens, you'll have the T.D. Jakes, and you'll have these mega ministers, but and they have an influence and a grip on politics and daily lives, but it's not the same thing as it was in the Falwell era.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, is great. We still have a lot of fighting to do. Separation of church and state is always going to be challenged. But when's the last time that we've had a major fight about creationism, right? Yes, Oklahoma's going to do it, Texas maybe, and you'll have a couple of places in the South, but a major push to put creationism back into the schools. That's awesome. That's great. That's some form of advancement. I mean, you can almost every time someone wants to put the Ten Commandments in a public square or in a courthouse, you can almost guarantee what that outcome is going to be on the other side of it. Yes, you're going to fight it, you're going to lose, and it's going to be yanked, or someone's going to put a devil right next to it or something. Right? It's awesome. So we are become it. And right now, with so many groups out there, if you don't want to be active, if you want to be super active, if you identify as in the LGBTQ, etc. Communities, if you're Black, Hispanic, Asian, etc., it doesn't matter. There's a group out there for you. 5 years ago, they would have been picketed, they would have been boycotted, they would have been threatened. 10 years ago, they would have been firebombed. That's not the case anymore. They are here, they're visible, they're not going anywhere. And whether you just want to meet someone, talk to someone, you want to connect with people, you're looking for them, it doesn't matter. They are out there. Get out there, go connect, go talk to people, go connect with these people in ways that are personal to you. And you will find usually you will find a very comfortable form of home or family, especially if you've been rejected by yours. It has gotten so much better. So connect online, and as soon as you can, go find them offline.
So it gets better because there's other people going through this with you.
Yes, absolutely. You are not alone.
That's awesome. what are one or two resources? I'm sure you have a million, but what are one or two resources that you'd like to recommend for someone deconverting? if I can make you pick one or two, and I mean,
Okay, by one or two you mean five, so it's okay. The first one is if you are a minister and you are struggling, I highly recommend you look up the Clergy Project. And I know a couple of people who have come out of there, and I understand their struggle. I almost lived it. I'm pretty sure I would have lived it had I gone in. So the Clergy Project, if you are a minister and you're struggling with that, so that's one of them. If you're African American, if you're African American, go ahead and hit the Center for Inquiry, the African American Humanism Initiative, AAH.net, AAhumanism.net. That will get you to a link of varied African-American groups out there that you can connect with. And then Hispanic American Freethinkers for the Latinx community. They're all out there. So those are my favorite ones. And if you're local, check up Meetup. And like I said, get out there. There are groups, even in my area, where it's already saturated. It's wonderful to see every few weeks, every few months, there's another atheist or secular group that's starting out, whether it's people that are trying to mix and mingle and, they're single and they're trying to, whatever. They're out there. It's out there for you. The internet is available. It's a wonderful resource. Google.
Google it.
Google it.
So what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Okay, so you can reach me at, I'll give you two email addresses. Alix@dogmadebate.com is the first one. A lot of people know me from my appearances on Dogma Debate, and I'm still associated with that show. And alex.jules@gmail.com will also get you to me.
Awesome. Well, Alix, it's really been wonderful to get to meet you and hear your story.
Here.
Yeah, I've really appreciated you coming on, and you're a busy guy, and so thank you very much. I really did enjoy hearing your story. It was I always feel weird saying this, but it was a lot of fun. I do enjoy hearing these stories. So
wonderful.
So thanks for sharing.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Voices of Deconversion. Be sure to join us next time by subscribing to the podcast. If you'd like to learn more, check out our newsletter at vodpodcast.com.